All right, we're actually in Jeremiah chapter 3, but we'll go back to Jeremiah chapter 2. We'll start at verse 36 so we can get the context. Jeremiah 2, verse 36. He's going to make some pointed statements here. Then he's going to go into detail in chapter 3 with an example of what's been going on. Chapter 2, verse 36. Why gottest thou about so much to change thy way? Thou also shalt be ashamed of Egypt, as thou wast ashamed of Assyria. Yea, thou shalt go forth from him, and thine hands upon thy head. For the Lord hath rejected thy confidences, and thou shalt not prosper in them. Chapter 3. They say, if a man put away his wife, and she go from him, and become another man's, shall he return unto her again? Shall not that land be greatly polluted? But thou hast played the harlot with many lovers. Yea, return again unto me, saith the Lord. Contradiction. Verse 2. Lift up thine eyes unto the high places. See where thou hast been lain with. In the ways hast thou sat for them, as the Arabian in the wilderness, and thou hast polluted the land with thy whoredoms and with thy wickedness. Therefore showers have been withholden, and there hath been no latter rain. And thou hast a whore's forehead, thou refusest to be ashamed. Wilt thou not from this time cry unto me, my Father, thou art the guide of my youth? Will he reserve his anger forever? Will he keep it to the end? Behold, thou hast spoken and done evil things as thou couldest. Okay, that's a good paragraph there. Now he's talking to both Israel and Judah. Israel has already seen the collapse of their territories. Judah is soon to follow. So this is what he's preaching. Look at Israel. Israel has strayed from God. And Judah, you better watch it. You're on the same path. He says some crazy stuff in here. He says, if a man leaves his wife, if a man departs, gives his wife a divorcement here, should he go after her again? No, he shouldn't go after her. So it's not God's job to chase a man who strayed from him. So if you commit adultery against God, you do something wicked against God, it's not God's responsibility to go chase you. It's your responsibility to come, to return. He's not coming after you. God already did that once. He went to Egypt and pulled them out. Now what have they done? They're going back to Egypt. They've put their confidence, we saw in chapter 2, was in Egypt. Hey, that's the place he got them from to begin with. He says, should I go down there and get you? No, you should return to me. The returning is on your part, not God's part. So it's, look at a couple of things here. Let me get my notes up. Deuteronomy chapter 24. Deuteronomy 24, verse 1 to 4. He appeals to the law. He's going to give us man's law according to the Old Testament. He says, when a man taketh a wife and marrieth her, and it come to pass, she find no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her. Then let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. Okay? So, God doesn't like divorce. However, there are legitimate ways and causes for divorce. God gives Israel a divorce. So don't get so hard and fast against divorce, or else you're condemning God. So we got to be reasonable about the whole thing. Verse 2. And when she is departed out of his house, she may go be another man's wife. And if the latter husband hate her, and write her a bill of divorcement, she's not having good luck, and giveth it in her hand, and sendeth her out of his house, or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, the former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife, after that she is defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord. And thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. Okay, do we see a contradiction yet? What'd you see?
I see that in the other, when we were talking to Jeremiah, he says she can come back.
That's right.
Here he says she can't.
That's right. In the Old Testament, the rule is, if you divorce a woman, you cannot remarry her. That's it. So these people who think that you're married for life, and then you have an unbelieving spouse or something, or a crazy guy who divorces you, and then the Catholics are big on this. I'm just trusting God to bring them back. Well, if we're going to use Bible for it, he says you can't remarry. It's over. Okay, so we've got to delve into this thing. From God's point of view, he's going to take Israel back. We already know that. Furthermore, in Jeremiah, he's calling her back, even though he's written her a bill of divorcement. What in the world does all that mean? He's laid out the whole thing in Deuteronomy. We cannot do this because it defiles the land. And it's an abomination in the eyes of God. Well, then God himself is saying, come on back. What's it mean? Is God got a different set of rules than what he has for man?
Were they not in their land at that time?
They were in the land. Yeah. Well, Israel was not in the land. Judah was still in the land. This is under Josiah.
Does this fall under a different disconnection whenever they, from tribulation?
Well, it's a real simple. We overcomplicate things easy. It's really a simple answer here. Notice in Deuteronomy, who's doing the divorcing? A man. In Jeremiah, who did the leaving? The woman. She went and defiled herself first. Then he wrote her a bill of divorcement. It wasn't that in Deuteronomy the man drives her out. The man sends her away. God didn't send Israel away. Israel left on their own accord. Now he's going to give them a bill of divorcement. He's going to write it up after he... Now, in our passage, he's not written the bill yet. In Hosea, he's going to write the bill. But he's calling her back, saying, hey, come on back. Now, it's not right for the man to go find her. Now, you'll find in the book of Hosea, God sets up something crazy. He violates all of these rules because God goes after Israel. Now, God can do something a man can't do. God can use circumstances without defiling his holiness. Man can't do that. I can't set up circumstances and life problems in your life without me being involved. God can. And it won't affect his holiness. It would affect my character 100% to be that emotionally involved in forcing you to come back. There's a lot of wild stuff in here. Let's look at our passage again. Jeremiah 3, look at verse 7. Jeremiah 3, look at verse 7. And you'll see who he's talking to. He's talking to Israel, the 10 northern tribes. And I said after she had done these things, all these things, turn thou unto me. But she returned not. And her treacherous sister Judah, the southern tribes, saw it. And I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel, the north, committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a bill of divorcement. Okay, there he's given her the bill of divorcement. You know when the bill of divorcement comes into play? When he's kicked her totally out. And even then, we saw when we went through the exile, it happens in 3 stages. So it wasn't immediate. It was a process. And all the way up until stage 3, he was calling them, return to me. But at the final stage, number 3, you're done. 3 strikes, you're out. Giving her a bill of divorcement. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. He said they should have seen what happened up north, but they didn't. Now, if you'll realize the kings we're talking about, this is in Josiah's time. He's going to say it's in the 13th year later on down in here. Where's that? Verse 6 maybe? 7? Verse 6. Yeah. In the days of Josiah the king. Okay, remember what happens with Josiah? They find the law, the book of the law. And there was a great revival, it seemed. But it was just outward. It was a flash in the pan. He says, they turned to me, but not with all their heart. Feignedly is the way he puts it. So even there, what we thought was so refreshing and so great, if you're reading through, when you get to Josiah, it just seems like a breath of fresh air. But what you find out is it's a religious reform. Now, it does do you good to abide by the principles God has in his word. Guess what? An unsaved heathen man can abide by the principles you find in the book of Proverbs and have a better life than if he didn't. But it doesn't give him salvation. They're two different things. So, in Josiah's ruling, things do get better spiritually, although they've just obeyed on the outside. The inside, they've still got some of the high places up. They didn't destroy all those. They're still sneaking off, on occasion and doing what they want that they used to do. But they sure are a lot better than they were. But that's not enough. We got to turn 100%. All right, let's go back to our passage and start breaking it down. This will be my Bible doesn't have it, but Torrey puts R.A. Torrey puts a heading on this section as God's great mercy in Judah's vile whoredom. I like the way he put that. Judah is going to play the whore after watching her sister Israel do it, the 10 northern tribes. And so even in the middle of that, God has great mercy, and he does. Verse 1. They say if a man put away his wife, and she go from him, she's the one leaving, and become another man's, shall he return unto her again? Shall not the land be greatly polluted? It shall be. We saw in Jeremiah 3:9 there, the land is polluted. It is polluted. And there's something special about the plot of land in Israel. That plot right there is owned by God. We call it the Holy Land. Now, there's nothing holy about it right now. God's still got to cleanse it. When he comes back, it'll be cleansed, and it will be holy. And there will be one spot on it that will be more holy. Just like the temple, or the tabernacle. There was, if you went into the holy place, there's the showbread, there's the candlestick, the altar of incense. I mean, that's pretty holy right there. That's getting there. And you got to be somebody special to get in that far. But there's a spot even more holy than that. The most holy place. Okay? That's another spot greater than the first one. The same will be the plot of land of Israel. Israel will be holy in the millennium. More holy than the rest. And of that, there will be one spot that's the most holy. Jerusalem, where Jesus Christ will sit on a throne. Physically. So they've defiled this land. This land is special to God. He gave it to them. He's been holding it. And that makes him mad. Jeremiah 2 verse 7. He says, I brought you into a plentiful country to eat the fruit thereof and the goodness thereof. But when ye entered, ye defiled my land and made my heritage an abomination. Whew. He takes it as very serious. Now, the same can be applied to us. This is all Old Testament doctrine, and buddy, we can get all on board and point our fingers and yell at those idiots, 4,000 years ago, and why didn't they do better? Okay, let's make it personal for just a second. We can't do it for longer. We'll all get under conviction. But for a second, realize God has a new piece of property that he's bought. You're bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are his. So you can defile this flesh, and you've defiled his property. He owns it. Just because he's going to remake it doesn't take away from the fact he bought it. It's his. So we don't get to do just whatever we want to with this body. He says in Romans 12, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercy of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God. You don't get to do whatever you want to with this body. It's owned. It's property of somebody else. Now, let's get off of that because we're all going to get under conviction. Leviticus. Leviticus 18. Leviticus 18:24. He says, defile not ye yourselves in any of these things, for in all these the nations are defiled, which I cast out before you. Okay, so he's telling Israel something. We understand what he's telling them. It's pretty plain, but I'm just going to repeat it in different words so I'll make sure you know what he said. He said, I kicked out a bunch of people to let you get in here. Now, they were doing some stuff I did not like. Don't you walk in here and start doing the same thing. I'm still in the kicking out business. That's what he's saying. Verse 25. And the land is defiled thereof. I do visit the iniquity thereof upon it. And the land itself vomiteth out the inhabitants. This land is special. It vomits people out. North America is not that special. It doesn't vomit anybody out. We still got the American Indians here. Now they're squatting in a little smaller teepee than what they used to be in. However, they're still here. It didn't vomit them out. There's just something special about that spot of land over there. Verse 26, ye shall therefore keep my statutes, my judgments, and shall not commit any of those abominations, neither any of your own nations, nor any stranger that sojourneth among you. For all these abominations have the men of the land done, which were before you, and the land is defiled. There's that defiled land again. That the land spew not you out also, when you defile it, as it spewed out the nations that were before you. God's equal in punishment. He said, I got a special spot for you. It's my property. It's my prized possession down there on earth, and I'm going to let you sit in it, squat in it. However, it's still mine. And because of that, I won't let anybody defile it. If you want to defile it, the land itself is going to spew you out. Now, there's too many times in here that he talks about the land actually doing something, spewing people out. Now, I know what the standard teaching on this is. That's figurative language. I don't think it's figurative language. I think it's literal.
Ask Cora.
Huh?
I said just ask Cora.
Yeah. I think he means it exactly as he says it. You'll find him many times calling to the mountains and preaching to them. He's talking literally to the mountains. He says, earth, earth, hear the word of the Lord. He's not talking to humans. He's talking to the ground. It has responsibilities before God. Israel, as a nation, when they're in their land, it begins to prosper again. The actual ground grows fruit. When Israel is not in the land, it becomes desert. Study it historically. You'll see that's the fact. Because God's controlling that land more so than any other spot on this globe, if it's a globe. Isaiah 24, verse 5. Isaiah 24, verse 5. Here's Israel's problem. They had an agreement between God and themselves, a special agreement. Okay, to get this special spot of ground and have God, the creator of the universe, be their protector and guardian, they had to make a contract. They made a covenant. Isaiah 24, 5. The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. They messed something up. I mean, God ain't happy about it. And that land, the earth, is defiled. The earth. You would think it would just be the people he's worried about. But too many times it's something other than just the people. It's that actual ground. It's a special place. And he's holding people responsible for defiling the ground, the land. That's not something we have in our dispensation. You don't find anywhere where Paul's saying, don't you dare walk into the church house and stick bubble gum under the chair. You'll defile my sanctuary seat and I'll spew you out. No, it doesn't say that. There's nothing special about this. This is just a building. It's just junk we threw in here so we can sit down and be comfortable. It got nothing to do with nothing. But Israel, that plot of ground, that dirt, is something special. And you find that from just reading the Bible. In Micaiah, or in Micah. Micaiah is a prophet. Micah 2:10. Micah 2:10. Israel, the land after they came through the wilderness, getting into Canaan, the promised land, was supposed to be rest. They were going to get rest from all of their enemies, remember? But they never got it. They didn't do everything they were supposed to. Israel was supposed to be their spot of rest. So keep that in mind as we read this verse. Micah 2:10. Arise ye and depart. They've been doing wicked. Now it's time to leave. For this is not your rest. You can't stay here. Because it is polluted, it shall destroy you, even with sore destruction. The land, he makes even the ground become their adversary. It won't produce. You find over there in Isaiah where he says, I used to take 1/10 from you. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow you to grow your field, and it'll only produce a 10%. Now, that's the land. God's dealing a special agreement between God and the ground of Israel. Back in Jeremiah 3, verse 1, he says, But thou hast played the harlot with many lovers. And they did. In chapter 2, verse 20, he says, For of old time I have broken thy yoke and burst thy bands, and thou saidest, I will not transgress. When upon every high hill and under every green tree thou wanderest, playing the harlot. He said, I took care of all your problems. You had some bondage. I took care of it. You were a slave, remember? I took care of that. You had some enemies come in. I took care of that. And when I did that, you said, oh, if you just deliver us, then we'll be yours, and, we would never do anything against it. We understand now. And then it wasn't 2 hours later, and here we go again. Right back to it. That's what people are still doing. In Jeremiah 2:23, how canst thou say I'm not polluted? I have not gone after Balaam. All the way through, you see Israel as a nation being drawn in, and it makes no sense to us today. Why would somebody be so driven to worship an idol? It just doesn't make any sense to us. It's satanic. It's not supposed to make sense. If you're duped by the devil, you'll do whatever he wants to, and you'll think that's a good thing to do. And you'll think that just makes so much sense when it doesn't make any sense. Don't listen to him at all. In Deuteronomy 22:21, Deuteronomy 22:21. Deuteronomy 22:21, he says, "Then shall they bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of the city shall stone her with stones that she die, because she hath wrought folly in Israel, to play the whore in her father's house. So shalt thou put evil away from among you." God prescribed some things to do to keep the land from being polluted. He said, I know there's going to be some idiots down there that's going to do some stupid things. Here's the system I have in place. You can keep the land from getting polluted and spewing you out by taking this step. Now, what about when the whole nation is doing it? He's got to kick the whole nation out. In Judges chapter 19, Judges 19 verse 2. I don't have time to cover the whole chapter. This is a chapter nobody talks about, so go home and read it and you'll know more than most people.
He was never supposed to marry her.
Yeah. Judges 19:2. And his concubine played the whore against him, and went away from him unto her father's house in Bethlehem, Judah, and was there 4 whole months. Okay, so she stayed there for 4 months. She left him. You know what her end's going to be? She dies. She no good. She gone. That's what happens. Israel does the same thing as a nation. They left God. Ran to Egypt. Ran to he says, under every green tree, you've run off. So you know what's going to happen? Same thing. God's going to go pursue them, even though he doesn't have to. He's going to go pursue them, just like this man does here. You know what ends up happening? It's over. She doesn't fare well. She dies. Okay, so is Israel as a nation with regards to their relationship between them and God. They've broken their covenant. You know how God has a new relationship with Israel in the second covenant, the new covenant that he gives them? There's only one way he can do that. He regenerates them. Because they're dead to him right now. They're dead. Just like you and I. The only way we get salvation is not by God adding something to us. No, it's by God bringing us a new creature, making us alive. A new creature, totally different. We've been born again. That's the same thing that has to happen to the nation in order for that Israel to inherit the land and go into the millennium. Otherwise, they're just like they are right now, dead to God. Ezekiel 16:26. Ezekiel 16:26. Ezekiel is a tough book. He says, "Thou hast also committed fornication with the Egyptians, thy neighbors, great of flesh, and hast increased thy whoredoms to provoke me to anger." Verse 28. "Thou hast played the whore also with the Assyrians, because thou wast unstable. Yea, thou hast played the harlot with them, and yet couldst not be satisfied." That's the truth. You flee from God. Egypt's not going to satisfy you. The Assyrians are not going to satisfy. You know what you do? You start adding sin to sin. It's one right after the other, looking for satisfaction. God already said in chapter 2, I've rejected your confidences. Everything you flee to for satisfaction will no longer satisfy. Ezekiel 26 verse 19, or Ezekiel 16 verse 29. Thou hast moreover multiplied thy fornication in the land of Canaan unto Chaldea, and yet thou wentest not, and yet thou wast not satisfied therewith. There's an old song. I don't even know who did it. I can't get no satisfaction. You know that song? Yeah, a million people have sung it. Okay, people like that song. They shouldn't like that song. That song is saying, I'm right here. I've identified as rebellious Israel. Cannot get any satisfaction. You know why they couldn't get any satisfaction? God said, I've rejected all your confidences. Because everything you run to, God will not allow it to satisfy. That's a wicked song if you want to identify with it. That's you holding your hand up saying, yeah, I want to be Israel. The rebellious Israel. Now, don't do that. Hosea 1 verse 2. Wow, how does time fly so fast? We hadn't even made it halfway through a verse. It's been 30 minutes. Hosea 1, 2. The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. And the Lord said to Hosea, Go, take unto thee a wife of whoredoms, and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord. Now Hosea is going to have to be, talk about a tough call. Hosea has to be an illustration of everything Israel has done as a people and as a land. And so he's got to go marry a harlot. Then she's going to run away from him, just like Israel did from God. And then he's going to have to go after her. She ends up down there selling herself on the auction block to satisfy her debts. And he's got to go down there and buy her. Tough stuff. Rough way to live. But that was God's call for it. But that shows you, he's the picture. And sometimes it helps to see it personalized, personified. That's what God did in that whole book. Was he said, I'm personifying the nation with one individual so you can understand it. Maybe you'll have empathy with a man and his estranged wife and him having to go run after her, and she's not satisfied with him, and everybody she runs to treats her horrible. But she still won't return to the one who treats her right. He said, I'm doing this to a human so you can understand what humans are doing to God. Tough stuff. And that's the whole book. I'm not going to read you the whole book. So let's go back to our verse. Jeremiah 3 verse 1. There at the end of it. He says, Yet turn again unto me. After all the wickedness we've been through, how horrible it is, if we see how horrible that Israel has treated God in relation to understanding it on a human level. If we can understand fornication, adultery, whoredom, all that stuff as being wicked on a human level, multiply that by 6 billion and you might come close to what it's like on a spiritual level when a man walks away from a holy God. That's how awful and tragic it is. But yet God says this, yet return unto me. Whew. Even though we're defiled, that's his mercy and his grace. He says, let's get back together. Return to me. Jeremiah 3 verse 12. Jeremiah 3:12. Go and proclaim these words toward the north and say, okay, who's the north? Israel, the 10 northern tribes. And say, Return, thou backsliding Israel, saith the Lord, and I will not cause mine anger to fall upon you, for I am merciful, saith the Lord, and I will not keep anger forever. What an invitation. That's a merciful God right there. He's gone through all of these extremes to show Israel how he feels. We think of God as being a being devoid of emotion and feeling. He's not. In fact, he goes to great extent to prove he has feeling and emotion. And here he's saying, hey, just come back to me. Even though I've had to kick you out of the land, even though I've done all this, come back. But they don't. Verse 13 is the requirement. It's not just come back and be an adulterer in my presence. That's not the answer. The answer is not add God to your adultery. That doesn't answer anything. The answer is not carry a Bible and run down to the same bar that you normally do. That's not the answer. The answer is to return, but in returning, verse 13, only acknowledge thine iniquity, that thou hast transgressed against the Lord thy God, and hast scattered thy ways to the strangers under every green tree, and ye have not obeyed my voice, saith the Lord. Oh, now it's getting a little tough. It's not so easy as we just prance right in and, we're just as proud as we've always been, and God's okay with our sin now. No, he's not. You're welcome to come back. But in coming back, there has to be admission of guilt. I'm sorry. I'm the one that was at fault. I walked away. Verse 14. Turn, O backsliding children, saith the Lord, for I am married unto you. And I will take you, one of a city and two of a family, and will bring you to Zion. Okay, it doesn't get any better than that. He said, we can get this thing all worked out, and it'll be just hunky-dory. Everything will be fine. There's just one little cause that's troubling me. You've got to admit that you were at fault. I'm not just going to say, okay, let's just forget about it. We'll just forgive and forget. No, there's no forgive and forget, because you've got to ask for forgiveness. If you didn't ask for it, why would I offer it to begin with? That's the way God is. Now, is God holding a grudge? You better believe it. That's exactly what he's doing. You offended God. When God's offended, it ain't good. And he holds a grudge. Furthermore, he says he owns something that takes care of his grudges. Vengeance. That's how God handles his grudges. He says, vengeance belongeth to me. Wow. You don't want to make him mad. He's got too many options at his disposal. And there's a whole bunch of verses here, and if I go through them all, we'll be here all night. Let me go right to verse 2. Jeremiah 3:2. He says, lift up thine eyes unto the high places, and see where thou hast been lain with. In the ways hast thou sat for them, as the Arabian in the wilderness, and thou hast polluted the land with thy whoredoms and with thy wickedness. Okay, he tells them to lift up their eyes. He says you need to do some inspection. That's a good thing for us to do on a periodic timetable. Inspect your life. Do a self-test. Am I more spiritual today than I was yesterday, last week, last year? Do yourself a test. If I'm not, then let me find out what I can repent of. Ouch, nobody likes that word. That's a good one. Find out what I can repent of so that I can be better. Your spiritual life should be growing. Now, your financial and your worldly view may not. You may not be doing great on the world standard, but that doesn't really matter. If you're doing good and doing better on the spiritual scale, you're going where God wants you to. He wants you to grow, get more and more like him. However, it's not natural for us to do that. What's natural for us to do is start seeing the world and just melding right into it. That's what most people do. He says in Jeremiah 2:23, how canst thou say I am not polluted? That's what most people do. They say, well, I'm really not that bad. Yeah, I don't feel any more spiritual than I was, last week, but I've kind of hit the peak, the plateau, It doesn't get much better than me. I know it all already. I mean, really, that's how people think. They might not say it, but that's exactly the way they think, or else they wouldn't be satisfied until they found a way to get more of God.
What they usually say is they're not bad because they haven't killed anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the world does that. Christians do the other. I'm talking about the Christians. You and I. We say that one. We say, I've already learned so much. What else could I learn? I already know all the doctrines. What more could I get? Yeah, I'm not as good as... I haven't learned as much as I did last year, but there's a reason for that. Now I already know it. Baloney. That one gets convicting. Let's get off of it. Look at Luke chapter 16. You have to lift up your eyes and do an inspection. Everybody's going to. It's better to do it now when something can be done about it. There's going to be a time that every single person is going to do a self-inspection when there's nothing that can be done about it. Luke 16:23. And in hell he lifted up his eyes. Ooh, Jeremiah was telling people that were on earth to lift up their eyes. There comes a time you will lift them up, but it'll be from hell, and there's nothing that can be done about it. Being in torment, and seeth Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. Okay, back to Jeremiah 3, verse 2. Jeremiah 3:2. Lift up thine eyes unto the high places. Okay, so it's not just enough to lift up your eyes and do a general examination. There's some things that are extremely grievous to God. High places is one of them. That's where they had their groves and the images to idols. God says, start right there. And that's what we do. In our life, don't ignore the big problems and look for little ones. Start with the big ones and work your way down. People do that. And I don't have to get specific, you know what I mean. Jeremiah 2:20. Jeremiah 2:20, we've seen this. He says, for of old time I have broken thy yoke and burst thy bands. Those are big things God was doing for them. And thou saidest, I will not transgress. Okay? They made a deal with God. God did some big things for us. He has. If you don't think he has, you're not paying attention. You need to start back at Genesis chapter 1. Come back through it again. God's done some big things for us. And I'll guarantee you, everybody in here, everybody, if you'll be honest with yourself, has made this same deal. You said, God, if you get me out of this jam, I will whatever. Do more of this. Do better at that. Everybody has made that deal. That's natural. I think God puts that inbred into man for him to do that, so that God can do some great things for man, and man feel obligated to God, which he should. He said right here to Israel, I did that deal with you. I broke your bands. I took you out of the yoke. And you told me I'm not going to transgress. You got me out of that one. Big one's over with. And then all of a sudden, upon every high hill, there's those high places, and under every green tree, thou wanderest. Okay, it's easy for man to make a religious switch. Man is a religious being. He can't not be religious. Your religion is God or the devil. There's no middle ground. Now, the devil may come to you in different forms, different names. He may be called Allah. It's still the devil. It's either the God of this book right here, or it's the devil, regardless of what name he goes by. Everybody's religious. Some religions go by this name, atheist. That's the devil's mask. Is the devil right behind it. Because nobody can refuse to be religious. That's the way God created him. You have to serve something. They'll be serving under every green tree. They'll find a high place. The high place for a humanist who thinks they deny God is themselves. I'm God. Or they'll do this one, a deist. They'll say, or a pantheist. They'll say God is in everything. We're all God. Baloney. They think they're more God than I am. Here's how you know. When your opinion contradicts their opinion, they think theirs is more viable than yours. Therefore, they're more God than you are. That's the person who thinks they're pantheist. God's in everything and everything is God. They don't really believe that. People say this one. They say, there is no truth. You'll hear that. A heathen will say that. There is no truth. So you just ask him, is that the truth? Well, they just contradicted themselves. But you see how the devil will lie to them? He comes in many forms. They'll switch it. They'll say this one. They'll say, there's no absolute truth. Is that absolutely true? It's not. You see, you keep searching. At the bottom root of it, God is calling for all of it. All of it, they've turned from God to seek idols. No man can deny God with a sound mind. So we got to destroy his way of thinking. If you can think, and you'll stay in that book, he'll clear up your mind so you can think, you'll find God is the reasonable answer. That's what he's saying to Israel as a nation. It's to Judah, but he's calling Israel as well, too. He's saying, look, this nation has done the unreasonable thing. I saved them. They made a deal with me. They've gone back on the deal. And now all I'm saying is, hey, come to me and say we messed up and let's start over. But they won't do it. That doesn't make any sense. And we better stop there. I thought we were going to get 5 verses in. We did a verse and a half. That's not bad. Well, we'll pick up there next week.